You admitted it. You confessed.
Yeah.
Useful skills into pulling things together.
Well, it should be for. Well, no, it's very No, it's so I'm always wondering, it should be bigger and bigger. Separate architectural design is most of the country. All right, well, we do not have our moderator, so I am taking control now. I'm just going to brief, but I can't really take the moderator because I didn't develop any questions for this. So this panel is How Intelligent Are We Anyway, and you can go quickly. We will not take a whole hour for you to be able to judge that question. So my name is Jablokow. I'm a science fiction writer. I will use up some time by having the panel introduce themselves and tell us the most intelligent thing they've ever done. Or the thing that has most demonstrated their intelligence to others. All right, Judith, why don't you start? Please, this one will be easy. I'm lobbing a softball to you.
Hi, I'm Judith Berman, and I write science fiction and fantasy on Singularity. I might have some bearing on this panel. What I think it is about is what it was.
My name is Ted Chiang. I'm a science fiction writer. And I will also decline to answer, but I'll just say that I'm interested in questions of, is there such a thing as, superintelligence? Is intelligence actually a useful survival trait? What are the adaptive advantages of intelligence? So that's what I hope to discuss.
And what is intelligence?
And of course, as in the course of answering those questions, we will need to address the question, what is intelligence?
I'm Gwendolyn, Clare. I write. I'm also here in my capacity as a biologist. Though I guess, I have an intelligent thing that's also a not very intelligent thing. So I have a PhD in biology, but it's in the ecology of fungi, which there is not really a remarkable skill. So I spent 7 years of my life getting a completely useless degree. So you can judge for yourselves whether that was intelligent or not.
My name is John O'Neill. I don't write. I'm a chief scientist at a software company, but I have a PhD in linguistics, which is one of the reasons I'm here. And most of what I do is create objects that, in some minor sense, mimic intelligence. So it's an interesting thing to do, but it's also a sidelight, a kind of a sort of angled view as to how far we are from really understanding how to make things intelligent, because we're not very good at it so far.
All right, well, since I'm pretty good at mimicking intelligence, it's one of my favorite party tricks. I'll be interested in hearing your take on it. All right, so I think there's actually two different threads to this. We're science fiction writers and science fiction fans, so one of the questions is, well, how do you make intelligence plausible? How do you make something seem intelligent? Which I think is one of the clues for how something persuades you that it's intelligent. Ted, I'll start with you, since you kind of came up with the clearest initial take on this. Like, we're all obsessed with intelligence in science fiction. In fact, that's what we think makes us seem intelligent to others, misleadingly and incorrectly, but we do stick with that. So what about it what makes it a consistent thing, a consistent concept, intelligence? I mean, why is that something that we have identified as a separate feature or entity or function?
Okay, so this is sort of the defining intelligence question, I'd say.
Well, I'd ask you a little bit more context. Historically,
well,
the concept of intelligence.
Right, well, no, I don't even
now
know the history of it, just as we talk about it. What are we talking about?
Well, I think, what is an IQ test measure? What do people think it measures now? What do people think they measured, 50 years ago? And I think 50 years ago, people had a naive idea that you could do the person test and figure out how smart they were, and that was that. And, although IQ tests are still used, they're much more, there's a lot more interpretation that you can do them. But even so, I was thinking one of the things, well, humans are intelligent and animals less so, or not intelligent. So we value, the IQ test tests certain kinds of cognitive things. But if we're different from animals, why is it that humans have this innate love of and urge to make music? What's that about? It must be related to our intelligence, right? Because we have it, and most animals don't.
I think
They don't measure that on
it's related to our language, probably. Speaking as a linguist.
I would say so, because I know both things. But so if you're going to talk about it, that's a whole interesting issue in itself. But I'm just bringing it up to say that the things that we think might be important in intelligence, which might not be actually important things.
Yeah, I would actually be a little bit contrarian and say that intelligence isn't one coherent thing, or at least if we're thinking of it as a particular one thing, that's the wrong way of thinking about it. I think there's lots of different kinds of it being, different ways of being intelligent, and some of them are really obvious, like how good are you at math? That's one of the ones that we use as a proxy for intelligence. But there's also things like, how good is your 3D spatial reasoning? That's not something, it's something that we all do unconsciously, but it's not something that we usually measure as a part of intelligence.
Well, and I also, I guess it's probably worth, talking about the way that, we conventionally have some notion of intelligence when we were talking about different people. It's like, oh, so-and-so, he's really smart. So-and-so, she's really smart. But we also have this way where we also have this usage where we say human beings are intelligent, where we're more intelligent than, dogs or mice or something like that. And I mean, it is not immediately clear that those are exactly the same thing, because when we say like, oh, he's a really smart person, are we saying that, is he further away from a dog than I am because he is smarter than me? Or are we talking about, maybe something else when we are, sort of talking about intelligence among people? Are we talking about a different trait than the broader distinction that we're making between human beings and, again, whatever hierarchy you want to assign animals to, like dolphins or chimpanzees or crows and octopus and whatever. Is it useful to use the same word for those things? The thing that humans excel at versus the thing that, say, Einstein excelled at. Are those the same thing, or are they different things?
Well, there was a story I thought about telling. I'll tell it anyway. But when I actually looked up, when I Googled it for a while yesterday, I realized that it's almost certainly apocryphal. So it's almost certainly not a real story.
Illustrative stories.
But it's illustrative. And that is that years ago, they were trying to build a bear-proof garbage can at Yellowstone Park. They had a few problems with bears stealing food out of garbage cans. And so they wanted to make them, make them bear-proof. So they made them a little more difficult for humans to use. And it didn't work. We'll get into it. And they kept doing that until they got to a point where some of the tourists couldn't figure out how to use the garbage cans anymore. And would just dump their garbage on the ground. And some of the bears could still get into the garbage cans. And so one of the rangers said in response to this, the overlap between the smartest bears and the dumbest tourists is not trivial.
On the other hand, the tourists didn't depend to eat.
Yeah,
there's a motivation there. The other thing I wanted to bring up was that, because, as a continuation of that maybe a little bit, a lot of what we view as human intelligence is not a property of any individual person, but of our species as a whole. That, there are other species that are pretty darn intelligent in terms of tool using or mimicking things or adaptability or whatever. But that we have the advantage that we've been able to build on our individual successes for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why we view ourselves as being much more intelligent than other species would be, is because we don't have to learn everything from scratch every time.
But we also have the ability to, create and watch a YouTube video on how to cook chicken or whatever, and so it's arguable whether that. And so that's kind of the thing where you try to identify is it in one spot, and it's clearly not in one spot. There's a lot of different stuff. I think of it as the general intelligence, sometimes called G, is the electricity and the lights and motors and all this other stuff. And different people have different combinations of those devices, which leads you to see, oh, someone knows how to do this, who knows how to do that. But I think there's also some underlying power that powers all those things. So some people don't have good light bulbs, but have the power line behind all that stuff. So it's hard to judge, you say, because the brain has all these separately evolved features that are often done for one task or another that we've now reused for other processes, like sitting on panels at science fiction things instead of killing or whatever we would more practically be doing. So chasing it down becomes harder and harder, which is why it becomes more and more interesting how you portray an alien or even a person as intelligent using only the words you have on the page. Particularly if you're trying to portray someone smarter than you.
So, one thing I writers might, because they want to create a sense of an exotic other, they might make them too much alike in that respect.
So you always have the same religion and dress the same too. So.
In the same language,
Yeah.
one language.
Well, there's a new intelligent person. So yeah, have you had kids? You know, I don't know anything. It's always funny watching a child because they just don't know. You know, but they seem to come out. So, all right. So what? Is this something, you know, evolutionarily that is driven toward or is inevitable in some way? Is this like a natural, is this like a freak outcome, what we have, us sitting here talking about this? Is this like totally off the wall, only will ever happen once ever in the universe? Or is this like a sensible thing to have happen, that we develop this thing?
Well, okay, so I think a lot of evolutionary biologists have, commented that humans seem to be really absurdly intelligent for their needs, because like there are lots of animals live on, say, the plains of Africa, and they do just fine without the giant brains that humans have. So it seems that merely, thriving in an environment like the plains of Africa, you don't need to be this smart, whatever it is. You don't need to have that in order to thrive. Pretty much, there are all sorts of hostile environments across the earth, and animals thrive in all of them. And we're the only ones that have this. So that seems to suggest that this is not a solution to environmental problems, trying to negotiate how do I find food, how do I escape the elements, because animals do that just fine. So there must be something else which gave rise to this.
So aren't there two basic kinds of selection, Darwinian selection? One is, fitness, and the other is sexual selection. So.
Well, that's the red queen theory of evolution intelligence, that we got to a situation where we were in competition with each other in social circumstances, and that drove intelligence higher just to compete in some these social circumstances.
However, there is something to animals that are generalists, like crows, that they can adapt to a wide variety of environments, and they tend to have a certain kind of intelligence that is compared to animals that are in a much narrower niche and have fewer different kinds of situations that they have to deal with.
Absolutely. Intelligence gives you adaptability, the ability for one individual to figure out a new situation, which you don't see so often. Animals that we would consider less intelligent will have, one instinctual reaction to a situation, and if you give them a situation that they would never have encountered in their natural world, they won't have a good response for it. And sort of the counter-argument to we're way smarter than we should be is that actually brains use up an incredible amount of metabolic energy. It is expensive having a brain that does a lot of thinking. So there is strong selection to become stupider, just because it's really costly. And if food is a resource that you have to work for, then there's going to be selection to become as stupid as you can get away with and still survive.
Well, there's another really big selection pressure, and that has to do with the size of the birth canal and the fact that human infants become so helpless. And even so, there have been adaptations where, it's why women are not, will never, on average, be as efficient runners, because the pelvic girdle has to be wider. So there's a big payoff. And also, women die in childbirth
you know, it is not like, it is not simply that, oh, you, I mean, you have to compete against luck, because it's not like, oh, well, I was better at hunting deer. Being born with an excessively big skull means like, I not only failed to catch that deer, but I died, my mother died, and all my younger siblings died. So, you know, that is powerful negative selective pressure. So there has to be something, you know, there has to be some really powerful pressure to countermand that, to work against that. Because, yeah, there are so many reasons it makes sense for us to, you know, not have big brains.
Yeah, they're slightly smarter than baboons, for example. They're very social, you know.
Chimpanzees.
But you've just successfully convinced me that we're not. You know, we must be faking it somehow because it's a very interesting. It's a question I don't know that anyone's answered. Because you can see why people would. And I'm surprised this wasn't like the anti-Darwinian argument. Well, why are there people? You know, what's the point of that?
Well,
Or
okay,
like,
so there are chimpanzees and bonobos who have a lot of the same behaviors that we do with one kind or another. And, you know, really, some photographer put up this mirror or Readercon or something like that. And one of their YouTube videos, go see them. And one of the things that the chimpanzees did is the chimpanzee is trying to see its own butt. And you look at that and you go, wow, they really are relatives. You know?
and they don't have. We have much bigger butts than they do. So it would be disappointing to them if they actually got this.
But the issue is not the plains of Africa. The issue is what humans did stay, you know, in small populations, not hunting in ways that are not that different from common, as you say, not that different from chimpanzees stay. They went like everywhere, and to go everywhere without taking millions of years to be able to do it takes other kinds of adaptations. So, you know, fire, clothes, joint hunting shelters are selective pressures for having big brains. People who could do those things had more children. Could go into Europe, could go into Asia.
But they left Africa as modern.
Well, they had to get smart before they could do that.
Yeah, but Africa isn't one ecosystem.
No, it isn't.
All of Eurasia was taken over by Homo erectus long before.
Yes, but Homo erectus could have already been fire.
That's true.
They already had shelters.
Yes.
So,
But that wasn't the end of human intelligence in Greece.
Right, but it didn't seem to evolve in competition in those more challenging environments, as far as I know.
Well, so, I mean, I think maybe now we can talk a little bit more about the sexual selection hypothesis. Because, you know, this is roughly the same mechanism that proposed to explain the giant tails of peacocks and the huge antler racks that some deer have evolved. Because, you know, extremely expensive metabolically to, you know, grow a giant tail or to grow a giant rack
Every year.
antlers and throw it away every year. Very metabolically expensive. You know, clearly causes a lot of problems in whatever environment you were in. You know, getting tangled up in stuff. But you know, despite all of that, you know, those species evolve those things, those features. It is believed because of sexual selection. That, you know, again, it's basically they were competing against each other. They, you know, having a big tail does not help a peacock against the rest of the world. It helps against the next peacock. Having huge antlers doesn't make you, you know, better compared to, you know, wolves. It makes you better compared to, you know, the next deer.
I will say that moose charging you with a full flag, you know, that's pretty effective. That's a total by a moose line.
So there. Well, but now here's my thing, not be, you know, fully cognizant of the biological implications. But those are single-sex drives. I mean, it's the males who have the big tails and the nice racks. But in humans, we share the intelligence. So how is that? I'm willing to posit that. So how is that sexual selection if both sexes have it?
Well, I mean, it could be that, and yeah, this is an objection that has been raised. And it could be that, it is a, uncommon form of sexual selection that works in, on both sexes, so that, because both sexes, they will, they gain advantage by being able to, assess social situations. Both of them, both sexes gain advantage by, being able to guess, I think he thinks so-and-so, is thinking this. That's useful for both males and females. And so that it could be a reason for both sexes to evolve those traits, which would not be the case for handlers or tailfeathers.
Well, and language would be part of that.
Well, yeah, one of the arguments for the evolution of language was that, there are a couple of them. One of them is that as human groups grew larger, that for chimpanzees, what ties the social group together is mutual grooming. And that doesn't work with groups larger than about 30 or 40 chimps. That's what really is the hard limit on the size of the band of chimps. But as humans grew bigger, you needed something to substitute for grooming that was easier to do.
But why would human groups grow bigger?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer. But gossiping is a lot easier to do than grooming, I guess, is a theory.
Well, it's interesting. There's a really nice anthropological history book called Montague, The Promised Land of Error, which is about a bunch of Catharist heretics in the mountains. And it's done from, I love it, it would be a great structure for a novel because it's done from records of the Inquisitor. And so it's got anecdotes about people's lives, and people hang out and pick lice off each other. They really do in the village. That's how they talk. They sit down and so they're very much like, even though they're wearing clothes, they have houses and stuff, they do very much that same thing. And it was so many, we talk about these large groups, many people live in smaller villages. So the question is, so is it like a big positive feedback loop that just happened to hit, that as you got better at social lying to your peers, they had to get better at lying to you, and so we got all this, nuclear weapons and highways and TV sets as a kind of side effect of that?
There's also, that's one thing, not necessarily mutually exclusive, is the fact that there are several things that had to co-evolve, several different cognitive abilities that had to co-evolve for us to get language, and one of them was the ability to view the world, being able to, kind of plan things, being able to, figure out the world, take it apart, figure out sequences of things and how to do things. And that's how discourses work in language. But it's also useful for, cooking a roast chicken or doing a lot of things. And it's possible that all of these, kind of cognitive abilities came together and helped each other out.
So yeah, so that's kind of my question. Is this something that is this something that's a really freak event that probably didn't happen anywhere else, or is this something that as you bounce things around, probably will happen? That you'll hit this takeoff point and you'll get an intelligent species. I'm not asking for you to say, oh yeah, 35% of the time.
Well, there's some things that have to happen first, and one of them is you have to have basically a million plan, because you don't get the kind of blood supply, you don't have hemoglobin in the same way. A reptile, a snake can't breathe and swallow at the same time.
They can't breathe and swallow at the same time.
But you can still see, you don't have to wait to swallow that whole mouse. You've got a hard palate. So you can still get air to your brain.
There's an interesting side effect to that. Human beings, you probably know this better than I do, or you probably know this better than I do. Most mammals have 4-chambered hearts, which is a really big advantage over birds and reptiles. The dinosaurs, they had 3-chambered hearts. So they didn't separate the blood when they went out of the body. They had the same chamber going to the lungs and went out the rest of the body. However, birds and dinosaurs had the advantage of kind of supercharged lungs. They could breathe out and breathe in at the same time. It's kind of a didgeridoo sort of cycle. And mammals don't have that. So I don't know that in terms of both of them have advantages in order for metabolic supercharging.
I do like the idea of kind of evolutionary places you get stuck. Like spiders can only get a certain amount. They're pretty smart.
Some spiders are really smart.
But their nervous system is around their digestive tract. So it can only get so large. Like hunting spiders have to use this stuff to dissolve their food because they've gotten so smart they can barely get anything down their throat. So they're kind of stuck, no matter what selection drive there is to get smarter, it's just not going to push them that way. So there might be this thing that we just happen to be in this spot where nothing was in our way, that just by chance, all the barriers that stopped other things from getting smarter, we managed to dodge. And that's just a draw.
I just wanted to say, back to your comment about eating and swallowing and breathing at the same time. Actually, a lot of mammals can do that, and human infants can breathe and nurse continuously, and but the larynx descends as humans mature, and then it becomes impossible for us to breathe and swallow at the same time.
One of the things about how useful and how much we paid to evolve language was that other species literally can't choke. That's unique to humans because our larynxes had to undergo a lot of work in order to produce the sounds that language relies on.
So, which suggests that, again, there must be a powerful advantage to being able to speak, because suddenly we have a species that is able to choke in a way that no other mammalian species is. So, there has to be some powerful pressure to make that trade-off.
Do we want to talk about the connection between consciousness and intelligence? Because that's something that a lot of science fiction writers recently have been sort of poking at. Do we need to be conscious to be intelligent? Do those two always go hand in hand? Or what would an intelligent organism that isn't conscious look like?
Go right ahead.
What about fungi? Because they certainly have interesting lives. Fungi.
Who knows what they're
Yes,
thinking?
I wouldn't call them intelligent in any way, though.
But, they've successfully fooled you, I see.
Are you talking about Watson's Blindside or some other?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a minute I will, as soon as we get past this point, I will open it up to. So yeah, we've always got that zombie, is anyone else on the panel intelligent? But, the rest of us faking it, I think consciousness is just an organizing principle. I've always thought of consciousness as the press secretary for the administration who's forced to explain what the administration is doing even though he's never been involved in any of the most of it.
We were talking about this earlier. We're all unreliable narratives. We're all not.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot it seems to me that once you have, and any species, and probably a lot of, not just humans, once they have some sort of internal model of themselves, that gets you caught in sort of a recursive loop that probably ultimately gives rise to, consciousness. But
Yeah.
that's just a guess.
Yeah, well, it opens up a question actually. We use this story. If consciousness is an illusion, who is it who's being fooled?
I think that's the unreliable narrator question.
Right, so if it's okay, I'll open it to.
I just want to, do you have any thoughts, say on Blindside, or do you want to?
Sure.
All right.
I'll answer my own question. So one of the theories of, if consciousness is irrelevant, if our conscious mind isn't actually making any decisions about what we're doing, what purpose does it serve? And one of the possible answers is that we have all of these different functions that are happening in different parts of our brain, and what consciousness does is it is a way of sort of integrating these parallel processes and putting together information that's coming from different parts of our brain and making sense of the world within. And if that's true, then the implication would be that you'd have to have an organism that is radically different in terms of, you know, the actual physical structure of their brain in order to not have consciousness and still be intelligent.
Yeah, I've thought, you know, there's all these different mental organs essentially that have to be synced up. I also wrote a story where people get uploaded and after a while they stop being conscious because they don't, there's no underlying brain that now needs to be organized.
So you need a limbic system in order to have consciousness.
Yeah, and so finally they just fade away, you know, because that's the consequences of no longer having the underlying hardware, you know, and so I don't think they thought that uploading, that that was my response to it. I don't think you thought this through. All right, so go ahead.
I just had an early moment question. Do you consider the Ebola or HIV viruses to be intelligent?
No. I actually think, even if you were talking about viruses as something that could be intelligent, I would say that Ebola is a pretty dumb virus as viruses go.
It does evolve pretty quickly, though.
It evolves pretty quickly, which is beneficial, but it has, so the terminology is the basic reproduction number, which is the measure of, so each person, how many healthy people does that person infect? And it is very low. It is so low that it almost drives itself to extinction, because each person only infects 1 or 2 new people. By comparison, a very infectious disease like measles, each individual who is sick will infect 18 new people. So you can see how an outbreak of measles could happen very easily. But Ebola is constantly on the edge of going extinct naturally without us really doing anything.
And smallpox, then at the other end of the scale, which I believe has been eradicated. People are concerned since it's a distant freezer somewhere on the planet. How do you view smallpox, intelligent or?
Maybe.
I'm just curious.
Well, I see.
What is
There's-
intelligence? Like, is it problem solving or is it?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to be successful that don't.
Viruses are just replicating machines. That's all they are.
Each
One has its own evolutionary mission that's taken advantage of.
So saying that a virus is intelligent is kind of like saying that a protein is intelligent. Well, I mean, yes. At the beginning of evolution, we were all just proteins that figured out how to self-replicate, but I wouldn't use the word intelligent to describe that process.
I guess the
It's
upshot,
actually the definition of biology. So,
I guess the final answer may be that, you know, randomness and selection can make things that seem pretty smart.
Yeah, and if you can get by with doing that, why develop intelligence? You know, it's only after randomness fails that you.
So one way to address the question of, you know, would there be intelligence in our world would be to look at other species on this world and how close they are to the kind of intelligence that create that technology is very matter.
So I like octopus.
They don't live long enough.
Well, but that's a separate, you know, so I like their eyes actually.
They're cool. Stocks with firecrackers.
I like their brains, actually, or their 9 brains, actually.
They have 9 brains.
Well, each arm has a separate, each arm has a separate brain that controls it. Of course, and the other thing about this is that the central brain doesn't, one of human senses is proprioception, so we basically know where our bodies are. And octopuses don't have that because there's too many degrees of freedom in a tentacle. So they have a brain for each tentacle, and it controls that tentacle. And if an octopus central brain wants to know what that tentacle is doing, it has to look. Which is weird.
Now that's, your whole life is a committee meeting. That was fun.
There's an octopus story that's kind of legendary at MIT. A a researcher named Jerome Ledford spent most of his life looking at how neuron transmission worked. He used squid and octopuses as his models. He developed this non-invasive technique. His lab was full of aquaria, full of octopus. And one of them sort of became the pet of his son. But it was also his favorite experimental subject. And he would use this little stick to kind of lift it out of the tank. And some days the octopus just refused to cooperate and would ink up the tank and squeeze into a corner and he'd pick a different one for that day. And his son kept saying, "You have to leave Joe, the octopus, alone. He's my pet, and I don't like him poking with the stick." So the next morning, he goes into the lab with his son, opens the door, turns on the light, and gets this blast of water right in the face from all the way across the room. And later on, he looked around the lab and saw that there were these series of water stains around the door, on the floor. The octopus had spent the entire night testing ranging shots to figure out where the face would be when Jerry walked through the door. And he very specifically got Jerry in the face. That was the day that Jerry concluded that octopuses were intelligent enough to not have to be experimental subjects.
You raised a kind of perennial interesting question earlier. What does it? How do you write somebody or something much more intelligent than you are? What would really great intelligence look like?
Well, you have to show it in action, I think. Part of the problem is it has to solve a problem that you can't, but then you have to be smart enough to create the problem that then gets solved. And that's it. Part of it is smoke and mirrors, obviously. You have to, but the easy thing is just to claim that the person's really intelligent. And we all stray into that at one time or another. But it's a very interesting thing, because particularly our field, that's a thing about people that we are very interested in, much more so than other fiction, I think, is. And so you can often show someone just outsmarting other people or something like that, but it's particularly interesting when it's a problem, not a math problem. It's, we factored 85-digit prime number or whatever. That's just not it. It's how you show a thought process without really going into the details of it. Now, as you can tell, if this were a book, you'd be closing it because there's no. I'm giving you no detail here, right? But that's really as much as I can come up with. Right?
I think one of the answers that people who write about the singularity give us is that at some point, intelligence becomes so advanced compared to our level of intelligence that it's basically ineffable. That it's difficult for us to understand the logical leaps that they're making.
Well, and to use some of the comparisons that people writing about the singularity, they say that some people say that one way to depict higher intelligence is to have, say, your character figure out something very quickly, which it takes other people a very long time to solve. And so, like Larry Niven's novel Protector, he had a super intelligent character who he always knew what conversations with him were really frustrating because he always knew what you were going to say before you said it, and he always immediately jumped to the end of any discussion because he had already worked everything out. And so that is I think a useful way of sort of suggesting great intelligence. But a lot of if you believe that superintelligence is possible, then that is just a very sort of limited view of what it would be, because you can imagine no matter how much time a dog has, how much time we give a dog to work on a problem. There are some problems that a dog will simply never solve, because it's not a matter of like how much time you give them, how much advance warning you give them. They're simply not going to do that. And so some people would say that real superintelligence would be ineffable to us in the same way that the problems we solve are incomprehensible to dogs. But the great Egan, he has pretty explicitly denied that claim. He thinks that there's only general problem-solving intelligence, and after that, it's just a matter of how much time you spend. So he thinks that we are as intelligent as anything can be. It's just a matter of like how much time does it take for us to solve a given problem. And I mean, I sort of, I'm somewhat persuaded by that argument. Although I will really admit that I do like the idea that that there is something beyond but because I don't know what that would be, and it might just simply Greg Egan would say that simply because we can make this analogy that like we are above dogs, no matter how fast you run a dog or how much time you run, and so there should be something analogously above us. He says just because you can make the analogy does not mean that there is such a thing.
Well, it's interesting because I perceive in smarter, there's plenty of people I run into who are smarter than me, and there's several different kinds to me. There's some that I can kind of tell how they're smarter than me. They're just faster, or link things together more quickly. And there's other people I can't even fathom how they do what they do. And so even fictionally I could show them doing it, but I can't show what's going on in there when they do that. I think of it as kind of a, the shapes kind of like a giant Tetris game where they're, sticking stuff together. But it always seems to be beyond that. Like they see links between things that you could give me a million years to look for them and would not come up. All right, we have time for one more question.
No, I was just thinking, when you were talking, especially this whole idea about the dog versus, the human being and how much time. But it's like, isn't it possible that we're so biased in our definition of what intelligence means that there could be a form of intelligence or a sphere of intelligence that's far beyond any scope that we could conceive of? That there's another form of something that means intelligence that we have no concept of.
I'm a big fan of that idea in fiction because I think one of the ways that you can address the issue of alien intelligence is by just making their intelligence much better on just one axis for all of the different ways that we might define intelligence. So we tend to think of intelligence as the things that we, teach in school, but there's all sorts of different ways that an organism could be intelligent, and being really good at one of those, but still sort of communicating on our level would be one way to do it.
Yeah, I'd like to think though that it would never not be. We might not be able to completely understand it, but I think we could see it. I don't really like it when it's like something invisible that we can't figure out, because we are intelligent, which means we try different stuff. One thing doesn't work, we try something else, we look at it a different way, and often we say at the beginning, oh, we'll never understand it. And I think humans have been pretty successful at attacking in groups. That's one advantage humans have. We don't do it on our own, as we mentioned before. We trade stuff back and forth, and collectively, and we've come up with a system now that makes us incredibly smart as a group. Maybe not. Maybe this panel, maybe not. But we have one more minute. Does anyone have another question?
The idea of a jump to an intelligence that's ineffable. Drawing this back to how we got out of Africa, because we solved all the problems in Africa and we're able to move out. Well, we've solved all the problems in our physical environment here on Earth, and another intelligence is still limited by the physical problems of the universe. We will still have a constant in that. On first glimpse, they are extremely alien, but there will be a granular level where they are solving problems that we will eventually understand, or have tools that will process it fast enough for us that we can come to. That, again, just as we can say there might be, they would have to be out of our plane of reality. It just comes back down to physical constants. They would have to have something so not ours that it's irrelevant. I'm not sure where
are you saying that they still have to deal with like scarce resources, or how to solve resource problems?
Yeah. To the blunt Star Trek analogy, if they're a silicon-based life form, they're the limits of silicon.
But I would argue that we are still expanding our knowledge of the universe at such a rate that we don't really have a good estimation of how complex the universe actually is.
Oh yeah, that's the escape clause.
So it could be much more complex than we think, and there could be organisms that understand it entirely, that are just way beyond what we're capable of doing.
But given time and enough processors on the chip.
All right, well, we are out of time. We have to let you get to the next panel.
Proving that no, we're not. Honestly, I got to talk. Ellen trying to get me actually buzzing me in. So I'm in a panel. I know.
I don't think so. I don't think they're very like it's an Abramos cluster change. I right nearby.